Yes, yes. Welcome everyone to Channel 3 Stories, Environmental Justice and Memory. We are joined today by three presenters, Jen Clark, John Higgins, and Giada. I don't have Giada's last name at the moment, but this is an impromptu
Hmm.
session as there's been a few changes and updates that have occurred today, but it is all perfectly planned out at the last few minutes. So we're just happy to be here and happy that you have joined us today. Just a few and we're going to engage today. My name is Jametta Davis. I'm joined by my co-host John Higgins, who's also a presenter this afternoon. We are joining you from the East Coast. I'm from the Virginia area in the United States, and John is joining us from California as well. Today, we want to make sure that we just have a few things covered. One, please make sure that you have your audio on mute. We don't want to have any additional disruptions throughout the presentation. We have three awesome panelists that are here today in presentation. So we want that to go so very smoothly, and we want everyone to be able to hear. So if you make sure that you have your audio on mute, that would be very helpful. Also, this panel is being recorded. If you choose to not be recorded, you don't want your face on camera, please feel free to take yourself off a video. And if we have any presenters who do not want to be recorded, please let us know. There is also a chat. If you have any questions, if you have any issues that are going on behind the scenes, we will be reviewing that chat to make sure that everyone is in a good place and that we are supporting you during this panel. And this goes for panelists, presenters, and anyone in the audience who is joining us today. We're going to go ahead and get started with our first presenter, Jen Clark, who will be presenting 347 Dias, bilingual digital story documenting pandemic from many perspectives. And so, Jen, I am going to hand it over to you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Jametta and John. I'm really happy to be here today. I'll go ahead and, whoop, actually, I'm going to stop that because I did not do the little button to share the sound. Okay, so that's all set to go. I'll just do a brief introduction. My name is Jen Nowicki Clark. I am in Tucson, Arizona, originally from the East Coast. My family settled in New Jersey, so I grew up in New Jersey and Philadelphia area and moved out to the university to go to school at the University of Arizona. Um, and now I am here. I am the director of creative narrations. We do digital storytelling and photo voice training, participatory media training for organizations throughout the country, mostly working with education and public health organizations. My background is in adult education. And John, I'm really interested in hearing more about your work. Um, I was an English teacher and a civics instructor and student leadership coordinator, and that was my entry into digital storytelling over 20 years ago. And using digital stories as an adult education tool was um, incredibly effective in helping the people at our community college in Tucson to learn language, to learn civics, to practice engaging through their own stories. So I wanted to share a little bit about a project that we worked on, my colleagues and I worked on a couple years ago around the pandemic. Um, this is the English channel, so I'm going to be sharing the English versions, but we do have bilingual versions as well. The project was stories from the pandemic. Here I am in Tucson, just to kind of position where we are. We're very close to the border. There's um, a lot of international, especially Hispanic influence here. It's a beautiful place. And the adult education centers that we've worked at have a long history of of community activism and knowing the power of voice in getting things done. And this is just to give you a little bit of a background about where we were working from. My colleague and I worked with three cohorts of 10 students each, and we broke down the time to do digital stories about the pandemic because we thought that there might be. Why is that going without me wanting to? We thought that there might be um, some interest in talking about that, and we weren't sure, were these going to be stories that are all very difficult, that are painful, and it really wasn't. And I'll share you more. I'll share more about that. So we split up the time between 6 days, about 3 hours each, and they were at the Adult Education Center. So anyone in the community who had a story to share could share that. Um, and we have Mireya here on the right recording her story. She did a story about technology and how she really had to go through a really big learning curve to learn about Zoom and all of those things. We have folks on the left. We had stories about racism. We had stories about getting in touch with nature. We had stories about living with family members that you haven't spent a lot of time with. So there was a lot of stories about connection. There was a lot of stories um, about hope, really. And it was kind of a universal time for people to reflect on. And we found that people were very interested in talking through these things because equity was a really important piece of, I'm sorry, I'm pressing the wrong pause button. So let's go back here. We played a lot of games. We knew that we were going to be working in some really heavy topics, but we tried to help people connect on a human level. And a lot of folks had never met each other. And then before we knew it, they're carpooling, they're meeting up at mariachi conferences. And one guy said, "Oh, you guys are all coming over for Thanksgiving, right?" And we know, any of us who have worked in digital storytelling know the power of those human connections in the room when people are sharing important stories. So that said, it's also um, really incredible to see the work that comes out of the stories. And this was a screenshot from one of the DACA students who were there. We um, we shared our stories at a screening. There was about 100 people, and people brought their families, their colleagues, their friends, and it was incredible to share all those stories in one room, 30 stories. And then we created a website up on Stories for Change, where we also included discussion guides and questions because we wanted to get these stories back into the hands of the adult education uh, instructors to use in their classes. So I will, after I show this story, I'll go back and I will show you what those materials are about. So I'm going to go into this one. Share room. All right. So are you seeing that website now? This is the website that we created to host all of those stories. And as you can see, there's different stories and it's like a mosaic, right? Where you can't really understand the full story of what happened until you see all of the pieces together. We have stories about starting a business and having that fall through and having to make adjustments to life. We have stories about what it was like to be learning online as a young person and also having to deal with trauma, um, having to adjust to the virtual thing, buying a home for the first time during a pandemic. Um, it someone who started a business um, as a cruise tour tour guide right at the beginning, and she's like, "This was the first industry that went down." Um, and the one that I want to share is this one by Anna, and she did this one in both Spanish and English. I'm going to go ahead and share the English version here. All right. And let me know if the sound is coming through okay.
In December 2019, Mom arrived from Colombia to spend the next 90 days with us. We were over the moon, especially my son. We had a great time doing Christmas decoration. Christmas was my mom's favorite time of the year. 2 weeks later, very early on Christmas morning, my mom knocked on my door. She was in tears, saying, "My mom passed away. My mom passed away." Wait, what? How? Why? We just spoke with Grandma a few hours ago. My reaction was to comfort my mom. She had just lost her mom. She was 2,918 miles away from home. She was in so much pain. I think I immediately turned her into my little girl. She cried on my lap. We fell asleep together, hugging each other. But this time was different. For the first time in my life, I was her safe place. Time flies and grief is hard. COVID is a pandemic now. My husband is a health worker. He is at high risk. We are at high risk. And panic. I have anxiety thinking about the COVID situation in Colombia, the COVID situation here. It's almost time for mom to get back home. I don't want her to leave. I am her safe place now. Like a miracle, a week before her departure, COVID hit hard. Airports in Colombia shut down. My mom has to stay. I'm glad. I'm very happy. But I also feel guilty about feeling this way because I know thousands of people are dying every day around the world. I know people need to travel, but I am just happy. My mom has to stay here with us, with me. I am her safe place now. In 2020, I saw my mom having a great time, especially sharing with my son, playing with cars, playing tag, police and robbers, cooking, swimming. Wait, what? Is she playing? Is she every day in a pool with him? She never got into a pool with me. I love swimming, and she never swam with me when I was little. But she is doing it with my son. This is a very happy moment. Mom ended up staying 347 days with us. Thanks to the universe, thanks to COVID for giving us this time together, sharing, healing, playing like we could now when I was little. because she was a single mom working multiple jobs, tired, exhausted, stressed, and she had no time to play with me. Thanks for playing in the pool with my son, Mom.
Okay, so um, thank you for the hearts. And if anybody wants to watch the story in Spanish, that is also on this site, and I can put the link into the chat. There you go. Okay, so real quick, just because I know we're kind of getting short on time, um, this is the website that we shared with adult educators here in Tucson, and it was a way to get the stories back into the hands of the community as a way to learn. And since my background is in adult education, we hired other teachers to help us create these discussion questions. Each story also has their own specific discussion questions to go with them. And um, when we're talking about using stories for change, and this will tie in with the work that you've done with Paulo Freire, I love this activity where you can use a story like this as a prompt to get students or other community members talking about what's going on. And it's really 4 questions, and you can get so much mileage in a classroom for anyone who's an educator. Just thinking about just asking what's happening, how can you relate to this? And then you can just get a lot of people talking about, everyone has a story about the pandemic, everyone has a story about family. Um, and then to help people kind of key in what's happening, why is this issue happening? Maybe it was isolation, maybe there was some inequitable work going on, and what can we do about it? So I really like this activity. It could go along with a lot of things, but I would invite you to kind of poke around in this website because we've used it here locally, but I'd love for anyone else who might be able to use it to be able to do that too. It feels like just a start. Also, there are quite a few stories that are also in Spanish um, for anyone who needs more stories in Spanish. And that is about my time. Um, I'm really grateful for having been able to share a little bit of this, and good to see you all. I'm excited to hear about the other work that you're doing. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jen. We really appreciate that. It's a great, amazing presentation and amazing work that you're doing. At this time, we're going to ask if anyone has any questions for Jen regarding this project. I see a few reactions coming in.
I think I have some questions, but I'm going to just sort of wait till after I talk about Paulo as well. But I really appreciate your work, and the story is really quite touching. Thanks for sharing that. I think people are probably familiar with at the bottom of your screen, there's a react button that could let you send hearts or clap. I'd also mention that I'm also using it to send a clock when you have 2 minutes left Uh, I don't even know if that's visible on your end or not, but there is a, I guess I should stop the timer.
It is visible.
I
Thank you,
also have
John.
turned on captioning, and I don't know if it's helpful or if it's only on my screen. Do other people see this? Okay, so it's just for me. Great. So if you need captioning, as Jametta mentioned for translations, um, it's on the bottom of your screen. There should be a captioning, something, something. Okay.
Um, all right, it doesn't look like we have any questions right now. We do
And
have
Jametta,
an option at
just to
the
let you
end.
know, I have
Yes.
so many different little things open. I can't quite, it won't show me text messages at the same time that it's showing some of the other stuff. So I'm leaving it to you if you see chat questions. Okay.
Okay, I'll go back. Um, I do see where a few people are saying that they're going to wait. Let's see. And we have a link to storiesforchange.net. Thank you for providing that link, Jen. I will definitely be visiting the site because it looks like the resources are amazing for this important work. Um, and I don't think we have any additional questions at the moment. I will save my question as well, Jen, for the end. And Jen, do you have any questions for the audience before we have our next presenter go? Maybe you might have a question for the audience.
No, I'm good. I'm ready to listen.
All right. So our next presenter, Giada, are you here?
Yes, I am.
Okay, are you good to go? And everyone
Um,
who is, I'm sorry?
I really hope I am. Again, I apologize. My internet's still not working well, so I don't know if you can hear me well, but I'll try to do my best.
Okay. All righty. Um, So would you like some additional time? And so everyone, just to, bring everybody into what we're talking about right now, there have been plenty of updates, so please bear with us because Yada was just added to the session like minutes upon starting. So we just want to make sure that she's good to go and that she's comfortable. All right. So it looks like you're pulling up your slides. Thank you for sharing those. At this time, we have Giada Ferrucci, who is joining us from London, Ontario, Canada, and she will be presenting ecologies of memory of resistance, historical memory, environmental justice, and resilience in post-war El Salvador.
And Giada, can I
I
just
will
mention,
hand this over to you, Giada. And
Giada, at when you have 2 minutes left, I'll just, if it's okay with
Mhm.
you, this is the reminder that I will be sending if that helps you at all. It's a
Um,
floating clock. I don't know if you can see it on your screen, but we'll let you know. It's all good.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, John. Thank you so much, Zamira. It's my pleasure to be here unexpectedly, but also quite fitting because my presentation and my project deals with environmental justice. There are many theories out there when it comes to environmental sustainability, and environmental justice is a personal favorite of mine, and I think it's really applicable to the research context I'm about to describe. So once again, my name is Giada Ferrucci, and for the last 8 years, I've worked as a research assistant and now postdoc scholar on the Surviving Memory in El Salvador project. My doctoral research has been focused on the intersection of social movement activism, environmental justice, and storytelling in Central America in general, particularly when it comes to resisting mining projects and mining companies in Central America. But today I want to dive a little deeper on the theme of environmental memories within this project and how these memories will be visualized and shared through a project I'm working on, which is called the Digital Atlas of Environmental Memories, an interactive platform built using StoryMap, which links testimony of Civil War survivors from El Salvador, participatory digital mapping, and environmental storytelling. Bear with me as I'm at the early stages of this project, so that's exactly why I'm happy to talk about it today. And as you can see here, I explore how historical memory and environmental justice intersect in post war El Salvador. You can see a map over here emphasizing the role of cultural practices and storytelling in mobilizing communities for environmental preservation on one side and climate action on the other. Through oral history with survivors, I document lived experience of environmental change, displacement, and resilience during the Civil War, which started in 1980 in El Salvador and ended in 1992. So here in the map, you can see the location of the people whose testimony I've been able to collect. So these stories that I collect, that I listen to, capture how memories of forests, river, agricultural lands, and cultural practices are transmitted across generations. Integrated in the digital atlas of environmental memories via story map, each testimony is paired with photograph and geolocated data, transforming local narratives into a spatial record of ecological and social impact. While story map, it does allow multimodal integration of maps, audio clips from the interviews, photos I take with the survivors of the Civil War as we walk along environmental sites of memory. It also supports geospatial visualization, interactive and accessible interface, and above all, I find the story map, hence the story element, it facilitates participatory storytelling, enabling users to navigate stories at their own pace while engaging with multiple scales of memory. By environmental memory, as the one I'm focusing on, I refer to the lived experience of the environment transmitted across generations through stories, images, and ritual practices. So the digital atlas of environmental memory translates these narratives into spatial form. And again, I apologize because the presentation was supposed to be in Spanish, but I think maybe some of you are bilingual, and I think it's something that I need to mention. But there are many different concepts I grapple with in this research project. First of all, in this research context, social memory is considered as a dynamic force negotiated between personal experience and collective history, and focusing on rural communities in El Salvador, as I do in my work and you could see in the map, I examine how environmental damage caused during the Civil War by attacks, bombing, scorched earth techniques also inform today grassroots ecological restoration efforts and social resilience. Each story that I record in this context with Civil War survivors, which because of the age and the Civil War period are, of course, elder person, each recorded story from them is an incredible source of testimony, of knowledge, how the environment used to look like before the war, how the environment was ravaged during the war, and how today climate change is impacting very deeply restoration of the community. So even here, for example, I don't know if you can, if
Estaron
we
aquí
allow
de
you
mí
to
mismo.
load an example.
Eran tan potentes que pretendían quizás destruir los tatús. Según ellos había demasiadas, habían algunas. eh,
So just to give you an example, walking the walk with Civil War survivors as they stop in location of importance for the community, where they can show if something in the natural resources has been impacted by civil war, attacks, or by climate change. What I'm talking about is areas that are deforested, rivers that have disappeared due to droughts, trees that are no longer blooming and blossoming with special fruits because, again, of the degradation and erosion of the soil. So, really thinking about walking the walk while collecting stories and the multimedia component of videos, as you can see here, maps as we take the GPS spot of the sites where we stop, and audio clips of not only the testimony of the survivor, but also the sounds of nature. So the physical landscape, I would argue, is history. Every rock, valley, and cave holds a memory, and I'm inspired by Pierre Norat's lieu de mémoire, theoretical concept, and identify environmental memory sites as a link between war trauma and ecological devastation. For communities, really, protecting the environment means preserving historical memory. The farmers' ecological knowledge, as you could see in the short clip I showed, the safe routes that could be used during the Civil War, the plants that were edible as they were hiding in the forest, and the rivers that could cross safely to find refuge, it meant that these natural resources were also a source of life. It sustained them during the war. And a lot of these resources are just deeply degraded by now. So today, recording and mapping these memories through digital storytelling sustains identity and collective action. Tacit knowledge becomes accessible to youth, educators, and activists beyond the region. Not a surprise that in a Latin American country like El Salvador, collective artwork like murals, embroidered cloth, but even stones become source of art and messages for environmental preservation, as you can see here. Nature, art, memory are deeply linked, and it's impossible to not consider this link also in the storytelling that we engage with, whether it's in person or digital. The link is very strong and has to be, of course, made visible and disseminated in order to preserve historical memory of the Civil War, not only focusing on the human victims of the war, which were around 75,000, a huge loss, but also thinking about the link of the environmental victims of the war. I'm not sure if in the audience you are familiar with the concept of ecocide. I imagine you can easily guess the link with genocide, but with ecocide, the focus is the non human, or better said, more than human victims of a conflict. And as we think of the life of Salvadorans, as we can see here in this drawing, where even in their cosmovision, Salvadorans would define themselves as made of corn, we're made of maize. That's how they say. The link between body, nature, territory is very blurry. The boundaries almost don't exist. Land, body, and memory are almost one thing at once. So in my storytelling exercise, not only we collect new stories, new videos, new photos, I'm also able, thankfully, to access some archival photos. And so as you can see here, these photos are about 30 years old when the communities of El Salvador started to slowly repopulate the rural areas of the country. Many campesinos, many farmers of El Salvador, which were totally innocent, had to flee from the army, had to flee because their houses were burned, their crops were burned, the forest near their territory were also burned in a tactic that is called quitarle el agua al pez, so remove the water from the fish. So basically, by destroying all environmental resources, you are by de facto killing many people. And so these photos actually document the return process when people from the same community as this guy whose name is Tilo, were able to go back to this beautiful environmental site, despite the destruction, is actually quite striking. And here we are not in a lake that is natural. This is actually an artificial dam that was built right before the Civil War. No consultation, no consent. It displaced many Salvadorans, many communities that are actually submerged by the waters of this dam, a clear example of an altogether dynamic, even today, with many extractive projects, mining, tourism, for example, among others, that are implemented and built without seeking free prior informed consent or organizing any kind of consultation. So the idea, for example, with the digital atlas of environmental memory would be to embed these photos in the maps, but also to do a compare and contrast, almost like a before and after visualization of how the dam used to look like in the repopulation time, late 80s, early 90s, as the war was ending, and how it looks like today. And unfortunately, if anything, the local environment is even more degraded. Those waters are extremely contaminated to the point that fishing is not prohibited officially, but nobody would ever actually eat a fish coming from these waters because of the level of contamination. So, really thinking about this idea and how do we engage with people, how we engage with their environment as the two things are deeply connected. That's what I'm trying to do, thinking about environment as not only a resource but also as a medium of stories, a medium of communication, as people could really identify safe spaces to hide, safe plants to eat, because again, they have a type of environmental knowledge that is being transmitted from father to son, from mother to daughter, and partially my effort with this digital storytelling project, the Digital Atlas of Environmental Memory, is to disseminate these stories so that this environmental knowledge can be kept alive across multiple generations of Salvadorans and beyond. So here are some photos of my field work, and the environment, it kind of looks pristine. I think it really shows the importance of walking the walk, of collecting these environmental stories with Civil War survivors, because what I see now, it's flora and fauna that look lush, but when we retell the history from the Civil War and even before, we understand that oftentimes these places are now silent. There are way fewer birds, for example, or creeks are almost dry, you don't hear the sound of the water against the rocks. Absence also comes into many, many forms. And how do you tell silence? How do you tell absence in a story, in a storytelling practice? That's also partially why we think embedding multiple elements, the oral testimony, the photos, the video, the archival images, is meant to represent also the changes in the natural landscapes. So, for example, the idea is to collect pictures of murals, be able to participate in commemorations of massacres of the Civil War, but usually even the commemorations of massacres during the Civil War include an element close to natural resources. As you can see here, in a commemoration that I was able to attend in March this year, where the commemoration itself happens right next to a river because the river became the graveyard of multiple hundreds of Salvadorans who tried to cross this river called Rio Lempa, the main river of El Salvador, and that act as a natural border between El Salvador and Honduras. So where I'm taking the video, I'm in El Salvador. The other side is already Honduras, and many people try to cross the river to save their life. Unfortunately, many were killed either by the bullets of the soldiers or by the water of the river, as they could not swim. So even in the commemoration, the releasing of these paper boats with flowers on top is meant to represent a human life. Every boat is one person that was lost during the war and during these terrible, terrible conflicts. So this project that I'm part of is actually pretty large. We work with multiple municipalities in El Salvador, and we're trying to come up with different ideas to showcase this environmental knowledge through mobile apps, where as you walk the sites of memory, you can hear stories. We support the painting of community murals, workshops where the ideas of environmental restoration are discussed, and overall design trails, paths of memory that connects the municipality that we work with and the community museums that usually have been already established for a few decades. Community museums that really have to do with um, the memory of these communities. So even here, it's the same commemoration. It's three young people, children, grandchildren of Civil War survivors, and really the interplay of intergenerational memory that is personal, social, can be also national, is quite important to think about also in terms of the multiscalar storytelling environment, where people who have not direct memory of the Civil War needs to also know these stories so violence and human rights abuses won't be repeated. And so building this memory and preserving it through storytelling is quite important. And as you can see here, songs and music are also used. Stories, testimonials that become songs, moment of reflection during commemoration events, for example, and even other type of community gathering, and they are meant to tell the story of the Civil War, the story of the victims, both human and non-human. So we can maybe listen to a few seconds of this song, if that's okay.
Hoy que es noviembre te recordar, mientras mi abuela una vez fue mi pasado.
So a song of this kind is actually completely built, the lyrics on testimonies that we were able to record. And it's a song that directly talks to a fictionary grandpa, we can almost think, abuelo. So all the people who have grandparents, uncles, even parents at times they could not know because they were killed during the Civil War. And so they try to approach them and to do a dialogue with them through songs in this case. So the artistic practices, as I've been able to only show a few in this presentation, are quite important for the storytelling processes of Civil War survivors, but also their kids, their grandkids, etc. So really, there cannot be enough said about the importance of preserving environmental sites of memory, sites that are identified by the survivors themselves. For example, this person who also shared the testimony with me.
Ubicado en las riberas de la comunidad 19 de junio, o sea, la comunidad está en las riberas del río, ¿no? Es un río que abastece de agua, tanto para bañarnos, pues.
And so even this lady talking from the river behind her house, talking about the importance of preserving it, the multiple ways it has, and again, really all the elements that convey memory, environment, and identity for Salvadorans. So I really want to thank you so much for your attention, as I will be including different elements of this type of storytelling in my digital atlas of environmental memory. Thank you so much once again. Very on time.
Thank
I'm
you so
sorry about the exciting martial music at the end. I don't know how to turn that part off. Thank you very much for the presentation, Giada.
Yes. So, Giada, at this time, I'm just going to ask that we hold the questions until the end so that we can get our next presentation in, and then we'll have about 10 minutes left for questions from the audience. So at this time, John is going to switch roles. He's moving from co-host to presenter. And today he's going to be presenting Paulo Freire, Sense Making, Methodology, and Digital Storytelling.
Okay,
Ready,
so
John?
first thing I want to do is get rid of the timer. If you could do the timer, that'd be very helpful. It still looks like it's saying I have a X out. Okay, great.
Timer.
Give me just a couple seconds here, folks.
All right.
Share. Share sound. So hopefully you're seeing the title slide here and not all of the presenter notes. Is that correct? Okay, great. So this fits particularly well. And if you knew the background of how serendipitous all of this was, you'd even be more amazed. But I'm picking up on a presentation from DC in 2023, and I'm going to cut out a lot of the stuff related to story sense making methodology because I think the Paulo Freire and reflection fits particularly well with what Jen was saying and some of my work in Cyprus with using digital storytelling and oral history during a Fulbright with Turkish Cypriots and Greek Cypriots in a post-conflict society fits a lot of what Giada has been talking about in El Salvador. So with apologies, or you'll be grateful that I'm not going through all this because there's a lot of slides. And what I did was I put it up and made it available so you could go through and sort of use it as a little booklet, and hopefully the links work, but you've got my email if you want anything in the future. So I am embarking on this project, and just to let you know, Jametta has this link if you want to put it in the chat that goes to my web page. And I will point out a couple things on the web page. Can you see this cursor moving around on it or not? I'm not sure if you can. No? Seems that way. Okay. Anyway, I did oral history. It's in the left column, second one down, Cypriot Voices, where it has oral histories from Turkish Cypriots and Greek Cypriots about 15 years apart, asking them about their best friend who was a Turk or was a Greek during the war, before the war, and after the war, and these sort of things. Various storytelling projects from the University of San Francisco with students, and part of what I'm going to talk about is the reflection that's used to get them started on some of these things. Um, and then various projects in Nicosia, Cyprus, through Fulbright and the embassy and the United Nations before it became part of the European Union. And finally, writings project and research interests if you're interested in more writings about this sort of stuff. But to take you directly to it, this next link that Jametta has is to this International Digital Storytelling Conference from DC, and it's got links to everything more complete there, and I'll just refer you back to that. So supposed to go to the next one. All right, so, and that's talking about some of the things that are available in that resource list. So it goes back to reflection, which is, I think, part of what drew me definitely to digital storytelling. Took my first workshop in 2004, and it transformed my personal and professional life. And the thing that connected with me with so many other things, including my graduate studies and my mentor's work, was this whole notion of what leads you to the interest that you have in this particular item. And for me, it was really clear that certain things are part of this, and connections with my parents and my family, and an interest in comic books that I'll come back to. But I know that all of us have these connections that at one time or another we explore what leads us to this interest. So in the 20 years since taking, I knew that I felt an immediate bomb, and I, recognized that part of it was a belief system, the processes in digital storytelling, the creativity, the self-reflection, the bonding process with the other trainers. All of these are connections that I identified. And it started with an experiences as a teenager traveling alone in Mexico to go have immersion Spanish at the age of 17. Didn't know anything about Paulo Freire, didn't really recognize it, but I ended up studying in a place that was a hotbed of liberation theology and Freirean pedagogy that I wasn't aware of until like 10 years later, when I realized that certain assumptions I had about the world were, oh, this guy. So I also have interests in grassroots community-based media. And one of the things that I saw as a shared practice between community media and digital storytelling was this gathering of people who have completed their stories and are sharing their stories with the community. That's a real bonding experience. And, I'm getting little prickles on the back of my neck when I think about it, and you probably are from your experiences with these sort of group projects. It's an outdoor street festival in Barranquilla, Colombia, in the early 2000s. And we came across this. It was a university group that had done stories in the neighborhood and was now there to show them. It probably didn't hurt that there was a rum distributor who was sponsoring the whole thing. So I see connection between digital storytelling in the articles that, I've referred to, and digital media and pedagogy. So there's all references to community media. It's not particularly to the point in all of this, but if you're interested in following up in community media, a lot of my work was with the Community Media Center in the green zone that's occupied by the United Nations peacekeeping forces in Nicosia, where some of the workshops took place in Cyprus. And I have a background in puppets. That storytelling has been part of my life like for a long time. And this is the stage that would strap on my back, walk around. So I'm just saying again, these are the things for me that led me to an interest in things, and also to my advisor and mentor from graduate school. Again, references in the end, and I'm going to skip over parts of this, but her big project was based in a way of actually implementing Freirean ideas, and also her basic ideas, understanding and how, and to help people make sense of their world, which I found really a connection in digital storytelling. And whether it's the students in Cyprus at the top up there who didn't get as far as actually creating stories, but they did have photographs that they put out and they'd walk around as a way of getting it in 1 or 2 days instead of creating a video project. So these are the similarities that I've noticed. And I'm gonna just skip over some of these. It's a little more involved and related, but I know that with the link, you can go back to some of these. But I find the structured, meaningful dialogue in a story circle and consciousness raising groups and sense making, and the things that are all shared as part of this is some of the reasons that really, to me, make it really not just a reflective process, but emancipatory. Okay, I said it, and I only say that because it seems to be such a term that's used pretty freely these days for what is empowering. But this community gathering is pretty amazing. And digital storytelling, there's an addendum at the end of the slides there. So when I look at critical engaged pedagogy, it's particularly relevant to have it in a conference that's taking place in Sao Paulo. We have Paulo Freire. He was exiled during the junta in the 60s. Adult education. Jen, you see you're nodding there. So there's a lot of, sort of shorthand in all of this. And he's basically saying that all education is political in nature. And if you say it's not political, then that's basically a political stance as well. And a lot of this sort of rings true for those of us in the United States these days, particularly those of us on the West Coast, California, Washington, Oregon, or hope that we're going to get adopted by Canada in the near future. But some of these are the ideas, and I'm not going to read through these, just to kind of note the connection that's there, the conscientization, the critical guided reflection. It's not just navel gazing, and the notion of reflexivity and consciousness raising. The whole dialogue process, a group process, again, rings so much with digital storytelling. The idea is that you reflect and act upon the world, and then you go hopefully to a higher sphere as you're working through all of this. So this is, what I would see is this: you're just constantly spiraling, hopefully upwards. Although we've seen it's not always the way things go in the short term, we can only hope that that's where it goes in the long term. So I'm going to skip over these related to Brenda and sense-making methodology. And if it resonates with you and like to explore it, I'd be glad to talk more about it. And her key line, obviously I'm a little hungry at this point. Her key line interview. But I think part of what I wanted to get to was in sharing some of the documents that Jen, I think that you had about cultivating participant reflexivity. I have these also in the resources. This is a workshop and this is at the end of every class. And at the end of every workshop, I usually have this. And sometimes I do it in the middle of it to have people sort of reflect on what they're doing. This is, what about the concept? You can see that it has ties, the same sort of questions to digital storytelling, but it's born out of sense-making methodology. So here is just summarizing some of that. The best of what I've achieved. A concept I found invigorating, something I'm struggling with, what I consider a lesson for life. Comments or something I've learned. So it basically comes back to sense making about where you are, struggles and how you bridge a gap. Story, and this is some of the responses that I've heard. Story circle method. I found my own voice through communication with people from a variety of backgrounds. And then I have a couple of other responses that are here that are in the addendum to this. So, again, my personal context for all of this that would fit into all of this was Cuernavaca, Mexico, ending up in this place where I'm studying, I'm 17. I'm learning Spanish. It's 4 hours a day, 6 hours a day, 3 students, 2 teachers, and they're doing this weird stuff that I recognized a couple of voices from, Andrew Young from the US Civil Rights Movement. But I saved this document from them and I went back to it years later. And guess what? It was a place run by Ivan Illich. And one of the things I also discovered that was this was a hotbed of liberation theology and educational reform, and that Paulo Freire was there giving workshops. So, you don't know what's going on in your life. You can't say these things. And obviously, I have a reference to comics throughout my life and throughout my educational area. I think this is a lifelong interest in Uncle Scrooge as the one, what I would consider non-corporate character from Disney, and a place that in 1986 was a comic book store I ran into visiting a friend in San Francisco. This comic book store is now a mile from my house where I live. And the book that was banned in the United States, Para leer Donald Duck, How to Read Donald Duck, Imperialist Ideology in the Disney Classics. So I found this book and I was like, what is this? And I then had to explore what the heck they were talking about. And so I ended up in getting a PhD from Ohio State. So the summary that I have here is that digital storytelling engaged pedagogy with the many branches from feminism and critical pedagogy branching out of Freire, and sense making and the timeline interview and focusing on specific moments. They all have these things that really run through each other that I think inform each other. And what I'm interested in is how people, what is your entry point into digital storytelling? Or is this your first entry point? Or how have you been doing it for a while? But just that whole hearing the story of how people were involved is fascinating to me. So with that, I'm going to see if I can do this without embarrassing myself, which is, give me a second here. Jametta, I can see, what is that, 3 minutes? Whoa, none of my friends will believe that. So what I have here is, and I'm curious, I have one story to show. So either you can see somebody who used a student who found his Indian identity in the US, or you'd like to see something from Cyprus. And I'm interested to know which one you'd like to see. This is actually my favorite of all time is a person in Cyprus who did this. It has nothing to do with the conflict. Those links are in a Cyprus Stories link that Jametta could share with you. It's YouTube Cyprus Stories, and there are works that I did with civil society organizations and students in various universities, and those are all available. But if I had to say, the one story that I found just most delightful that seems to cross cultural lines is this one. So I know I asked for a question, but I'm realizing I don't have quite access to all the screens that would tell me what you might vote for. So let me try this one, okay? I hope this will.
Hayatımdaki büyük önemli soru.
Someone, a man
Okula
said
ilk defa
yes.
başladığım zaman herkese sorulan soru bana da sorulmaya başlanmıştı. Tüm ailem bana aynı soruyu sorup duruyordu. Zehra, büyüdüğünde ne olacaksın? Tabii benim cevabım hazırdı. Her çocuğun hazır olduğu gibi. Ben danssız olacağım diyordum. Ben küçükken danssız olmaya karar vermiştim. Evet, bu doğru. Sebebi basitti. Hareket etmeyi, müziğinin hayatımda olması, melodilerin kulağımdan geçip kalçama ulaşmasına bayılıyordum. Tabii buna ailem de bayılıyordu. Ailemin neşe kaynağıydım. En azından ben öyle biliyordum. Yılbaşların, bayram yemeklerinin, doğum günü partilerinin vazgeçilmez büyük yıldızıydım. Ben küçükken Annem ve babam işteyken nenemde kalıyor. Onlarla birlikte bütün günümü eğlenceli bir şekilde geçiriyordum. Ne yapıyor muydum? Tabii ki Hanay'da bütün gün dans edip duruyordum. Gün boyunca. Buna nenem bayılıyordu. Fakat korkusu da vardı. Eğer gerçekten danssız olursam diye. Bundan gerçekten ödü kopuyordu.
Bir yere değil. Dans oynaman, dansözüm olacak değil.
Ne yapardım? Nasıl oynardım?
Dansöz gibi işte ben dansöz olacağım derdin. O yemeğini alırdın benim. Bağlardın beline, dururdun oynayarsın. Yapmam dedim sana, yine yapardın. Oynardın, ne yapacaksın kızım dedim sana. Ben dansöz olacağım. Yoksa dansöz, annen dansöz mü oldu? Dedim sana, aslında dansöz olacak. Artist olacak. Yok. Hoşuma gitmedi Zehra Hanım. Olasından kız ya ben isterim hanım olasın, okuyasın. Buna göre iş alasın, annen gibi hanım olasın.
Ve zaman akıp gitti. Ve sorunun cevabını da kaybetmiş ve unutmuştum. Büyümüştüm. Değişmişti. Peki ilerleyen yıllarda ne olmuştu da sorunun cevabını unutmuştum. Anlamını kaybediyor. Hatta belki hiçbir zaman tekrar bu önemli sorunun cevabını bulamayacaktım. Ve hayatımı belki de tamamen yanlış, ters yöne doğru yöneltecektim. Aslında cevap basitti. Fakat Kıbrıs'taki yaşam şartları bizi cevaplarımızı unutmaya zorlamış ve bunda da başarılı olmuştu. Merhaba, işte ben ve sürpriz. Ben dansöz olmadım. Fakat halen daha dans etmeye devam ediyorum. Elimde değil, kendimi tutamıyorum. Müziğin ritmi beni cezbediyor. Halen daha sahnelerin bir numaralı yıldızıyım.
So with that, thank you very much, and looking forward to a great discussion and discussions afterwards. Something's planned, and I'll get rid of it in a second.
Yes. Plenty of reaction. So at this time, I'm going to ask anyone if they have any questions. If you would like, you can also place your questions in the chat and we will read them. Does anyone have any questions? For John, Giada, Jen. Right, we're getting some messages in the chat. Amazing work. Jen. Yes, amazing work from all of our presenters. We really appreciate this. Everyone's quiet. Are you waiting for us to end the session and then go to channel 0 for the, the additional discussion?
I'm just really excited to check out your website, John, and to see all of the. It just seems to be so much there. I'm also very interested in Farian pedagogy, and it's exciting to see that there. And Giada, your work is really exciting. I am also interested in seeing more of where that goes. So I'm so glad that you were able to present in this presentation. It really did fit. So thank you.
Giada, I was curious about, working in a post-conflict or situation is dancing on tiptoes. I mean, I know that I had to get used to language. You can't say the North or the South. You have to say the communities because it's a divided island. And so there's all that juggling of very sensitive political and recognizing that people are coming from different positions. And so I wondered if you could just talk a little bit about what that was like doing that research and that work there, which is very important.
Thank you so much for this question. And it is quite important to consider safety, especially for the people we work with, but also have to be on type of grant that we work with. So I'm based in a Canadian institution. Our grant is from the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council, and they insist that all we talked about has to be historical. Nothing about the present, nothing about the connection to today's political
Hmm.
issues. And, it's tough because, of course, it's very normal for the people I talk with, I work with, to want to also draw parallels between the violence of the Civil War and safety, vulnerability that they face today. So I think there still are a lot of not healed wounds from the Civil War, so there's still a lot to talk about compared to what happened in the past. And for people to finally be able to share their oral history, their testimony is quite cathartic in a way. Many people have not really had opportunity. Oftentimes, their stories were considered stories like exaggeration, if not outright lies. So to work together with a large team of academics somehow kind of gives it credibility. It shouldn't, right? But unfortunately, this is how things are working. But it's quite important for us to always make sure that the connection is deeply anchored with the past and not any type of, present denounce or like, claims of human rights violations, which is unfortunate, but it is what it is. And also for the safety of people, it would be very dangerous to publish maybe testimonies where they maybe, complain about the state of exception, which is a thing in El Salvador has been going on for the last 3 years and a half. And if anything, I would like to add a point. This work has been a long time coming. I mentioned during my presentation the duality of genocide and ecocide, and I do think to focus on particularly ecocide, you really need to have also like a long-term relationship with people with whom you're gonna, engage with in storytelling, because I think it's very human to want to focus on the human victims first. If you were to kind of go directly to people asking them about environmental degradation, sure is important, but again, so many of these stories about the Civil War haven't been told before, so people are very eager, understandably so, to talk about, their family that were killed, and so I think there's also this dimension to keep into account in a post-war context.
I find it interesting because I'm sorry, I'm just going to react because I think in Cyprus, you don't want to talk about the history because the history, they actually have to have a group that's going to determine what the history is because one person's freedom fighter is another person's terrorist. So I just remember, and I can just the trying to orient yourself to that community so that you're not the person coming from the outside, but respectful of what I when you mention oral histories, I do have on that page for the Cypriot oral histories. I did the first one with Greek, Turkish Cypriot students in 1995, and it wasn't until 2010 that I could do the Greek Cypriot. And the reactions that I got on that form that I showed you at the end during the presentation was how somebody did an oral history with her family asking about friends that were Turkish before the war. And she never knew her parents or grandparents to say anything good about Turks. And she was shocked to hear that Greeks were murdering Turks in their village because it was something that she didn't know until she asked the question. So I'm fascinated by your work, and I won't take up any more time except to say I'm really more than ever just fascinated by how serendipitously, right, Janetta, things come together that connect with each other so very well. So amazing, amazing work, Jen.
If I may add one point, and that's why I also think using story map was quite important. If you remember my presentation where I was showing the geolocation of the stories I collected are in certain areas of the country where I think our type of project is welcome because we work with people who have a more homogeneous narrative in the communities. Some departments of El Salvador, because El Salvador is divided in departments, um, had a very conservative view anyway, like at the municipal level, so they were virtually untouched during the war. So if we were to go to those departments, not only there wouldn't be many stories to collect, but would be, partial. So I think again the trust has to deal a lot with that, with which communities you start to work with, and we work with multiple, but slowly it does emerge the contradicting nature of some stories, as you said. Somebody's freedom fighters, a terrorist for the other. Somebody's guerrilla member was a subversive for others. And so I think it's also quite important what the point you raised. Thank you, John.
Thank you. There is a question in the chat. Jen, I don't know if you want to pose this. Do you want to talk about it
Yeah.
any further, or you just read it?
Yeah, Giada, I was just wondering, where could we find more about your work?
So I'm just sharing the link of the website in general if you want to get
Okay.
a broader look, but I haven't published yet my atlas because I'm still working on it. That's why I'm like at the
Yeah.
very preliminary stage. I think if you monitor, yes, the website, eventually I will publish it over there, so it should be visible, but also it gives like a broader view of the project, which I think is also quite important. And
Yeah.
again, I'm very grateful because I end up in El Salvador for very different work. I was in
Yeah.
a NGO that was focused on mining issues, and then I ended up focusing more on historical memory, but the two things are very much connected in a way, so it did work well. Thank you
They
for
really
inviting me.
are. They really
Yeah,
are.
and again, I want to thank you so much for welcoming this panel. John, your presentation, Jen, yours as well. I have all the links saved, so thank you so much.
Yeah.
So, sorry, go ahead, Jen.
Great. No, John, my entry point, gosh, I studied Frary a bit when I was learning about theology when I was in Boston, and then I went to school here in Tucson for my master's in linguistics. And my husband and I actually got married at Southside Presbyterian, where John Fife was very active in the sanctuary movement here. So I learned more by being in the community, of learning those stories of the sanctuary movement, and being in the spaces where it happened. And I was just lucky enough that the place where I started teaching, for you as well, happened to be very rich in critical pedagogy. And so I just feel like I learned from the masters. Like I just happened to be surrounded by people who assumed that the experts in a certain issue are the people who are most affected by it.
It's amazing how much we learn when we don't know we're learning.
Right?
And I see that
Yeah.
resonates with a few people just from faces. So if you wanted to share that, that would be wonderful. Stacy, did that ring a bell of some kind?
It's been ringing a bell all through this conference.
Hmm.
Making connections that are really personal for me, that I didn't know I could make. I didn't know the communities were out there. I've been so moved by the stories in the conference, and I'm just, yes, I'd like to talk about it, and I will try and reach you later, but I just feel absolutely inarticulate under the weight of my feeling for uh, and gratitude, actually, for the community work, for the social activism, for the love of our environment and the people who live in it, the people who died in it. One of the things I've felt from some of the presentations, one about an environment that has completely disappeared because of war, is the grief. and the profound relationship with our human relationship with our environment and its meaning for us. So yeah, I've been to a soft weekend. So thank you, everyone. I feel very humbled and grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. Thank you, everyone. We are a little bit past our time. This session ended at 3:30 or 3:30. So we will have to make a transition. And it sounds like there's a good conversation that is going on. We can continue this conversation in Channel Zero because there's so much more. This has been such an impactful conference. And as Stacy said, everything has been really inspiring, thought provoking. And so, Channel Zero is where you go if you want to have some continued conversation about what we've just heard. We also have another presentation that will begin in the next, 10 minutes, John?
Yes, about that. And I'm going to put the link to Channel Zero in the chat there. And
also, I just want to add that John, Jen, and Giada have included several links relating to their presentations. Please make sure that you check out the chat.
Yeah, and isn't there a way to save the chat somehow if you wanted to go back to this?
Yep.
Save chat.
So yeah, save chat, the little three dots.
Yeah,
on the top.
upper right-hand corner in the chat room or the chat thing. There should be a save chat. And hopefully if you do save it, you'll be able to find where it's been saved on your computer later on.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Jametta and John, wonderful hosts.
Thank you. And if you'd like, and you go to
Mm-hmm.
Channel Zero and there are others who'd like to continue this conversation, they can set you up with a breakout room. I think Jametta and I are going to coordinate on our next project here in a few minutes. But thank you, everybody. Really wonderful to see all of you.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Alrighty. So everyone, if you'd like to stick around, please do. We have a few minutes before we begin our next session, which is going to be Stories About Stories, Global Voices.